Well, Stewart's new book, Whole Earth Discipline, had a huge role in the conceptualization process for this conference. We were lucky to get a very early copy of it, and it really shaped our thinking. Stewart refers to Whole Earth Discipline as a manifesto, but it's, as a book writer, I think it's a very unusual piece of work besides being a manifesto. All of the footnotes and all of the source notes are not in the book, they're on the web. And they keep changing, they keep growing, and Stewart is in the process of updating them. And I think your plan is to keep updating these as long as people keep responding.
Yeah, as long as there's traffic, I'll try to keep the book alive.
So the book has morphed into sort of a quasi-alive, ongoing thing, which is wonderful to think about.
Well, I'd love to see all nonfiction books have basically an online access to the material that they come from, so you can go in and do your own version of the research.
The other thing that drew me to the book, the big thing, is the mindset that it promotes. And if Techonomy is anything, it's a mindset. It's what we meant on the website when we tried to describe a techonomic mind frame as a rational, optimistic, forward-looking, technically savvy work ethic that celebrates technological achievement, human ingenuity, and sustainable living. And all of that was written exactly with Stewart's point of view in mind. So David Stipp, who's here, a colleague of mine who will moderate the longevity session tomorrow, reviewed Whole Earth Discipline for Fortune, and he called Stewart, quote, environmentalism's pithiest polemicist.
Pithy is hard to say, isn't it? Without
Pithy
sounding
polemicist is, yeah. And he also described the book as one of the most important green tracts since Silent Spring. And here's a quote that I especially like. Stewart tackles touchy issues such as the importance of urbanization, the potential of genetic engineering, and the practical case for nuclear power, fully aware that many of the environmentalist readers he hopes to reach will start out disagreeing with him. So let's start getting people disagreeing with you here.
That's going to be hard. This is not a particularly tree-hugging group, as near as I can tell. But.
Well, in that case, I'm going to start with a question that was planted by your friend Peter Schwartz in your drive up here. Up here to the mountain.
Thanks, Peter.
Peter asked me to ask you what on earth a biologist knows about thinking like an engineer.
I have the genes of an engineer. My father was an MIT engineer. My older brother was an MIT engineer. And I got bit early on by hackers, and hackers are the world's laziest and often smartest engineers, and that approach to life is sort of one that I adopted. Biology is sort of like the big history story we heard. For me, the most useful way to think about everything. And one of the things biology teaches you is you're always, well, Darwin, part of what Darwin brought to he invented a lot of modern biology, but one of the things he invented was whenever you run across some data that doesn't fit with your current theory, you have to write it down because you will aggressively forget it. And that kind of approach of absolutely focusing on the data and the evidence, and theory comes last, data comes first in biology. And this is also helped by the fact that ecology, at least, is not a predictive science. So we don't have very many useful theories. We're still doing observation, and that forces you into the kind of engineering mode of what's really there. And then you're answering the question of what are these various species doing that is for them pragmatic. And so it takes you to the engineering frame of mind, which is that of ultimate pragmatism. If you're writing code, it has to run, that kind of thing. This is not so true of the humanities. It's not so true of science.
So there's something in the biological mindset and in the engineering mindset that can actually run out far in front of theory and not wait for theory to explain how to innovate.
Yeah, I mean, you can, laboratory biology, you're obviously doing hypotheses and then trying to get it down to an area where you can get something where the results mean something. But natural world biology is a lot like anthropology. You just go out there and you look and listen and watch and measure. and try to make sense of the chaos of activity, which is very densely netted. So the other thing that biology is useful for is stepping up to the world of increasing complexity that humans are engaged in through cell phones and everything else. Biology is not a bad frame to approach that with.
Well, we were just talking before about how infrastructure and biology do or don't relate. And you've come up with an awfully startling way, to me, of looking at infrastructure.
The approach I'm trying to take is, in a way, a step beyond what Natural Capitalism, a good book that Amory Lovins and Paul Hawken did on thinking about the natural world is something that is, we just draw interest from. We don't try to burn down the principle. And that was a helpful metaphor. The metaphor I find a little even more actionable is to think of the natural world as we relate to it as infrastructure. And so a bridge is infrastructure, and so is the river underneath it. And the same kind of things that you think about taking care of the bridge, you want to think about taking care of the river. Radio spectrum is infrastructure, but so is a stable climate. And the ways that you have international agreements about radio spectrum, we are learning how to have international agreements about moderating the climate. And so this is all a engineering approach to not just human-made things, but naturally existing things. And we are now, unfortunately, or not, nevertheless, stuck with the role of stewards of the planet. And that means that we are terraforming the planet anyway. We're terraforming it badly. We no longer have the choice of saying, oh, we're going to stop doing that and just blend back in some hunter-gatherer mode. That's not an option. And so if the choice is between terraforming badly or terraforming well, I think it is a question of good engineering to figure out what terraforming well means and then do it.
I wondered, we're going to start taking questions in a few minutes, but if you want to start tweeting, I've got the tweet receiver here, so please don't hesitate. I hope I understand how to use it. I think I do, having been instructed. I wonder if you just take a minute, because you've had sort of an incredible intellectual journey, starting from Whole Earth Catalog, which was really about tools and skills, all the way up to Whole Earth Discipline, which is about tools and skills, but actually is willing to think and operate on a much more mega project scale and scope than you ever contemplated when you started out.
Backyard geoengineering is not a real subject.
No, I guess not.
I mean, you can do biochar and stuff like that, but yeah, in a sense, the Whole Earth Catalog was a libertarian publication. And you know, this was back in the Kennedy era when he was asking us to do what we could for the country. And we were sort of saying, ask not what your country can do for you, do it yourself. Fine. But now we are dealing with issues at global scale, much like the Cold War in terms of global threat. The Cold War was created by and solved by governments. And I think that much of the issues we're facing now will be solved by governments, not just empowered individuals. Now, individuals, all the stuff that Kevin Kelly was talking about, individuals are getting more and more empowered and netted in all of that. And we keep hoping that we're going to have an energy form that is completely clean and cheaper than coal.
Right.
In the absence of that, then somebody's got to make coal more expensive than various clean forms of energy. Individuals can't do that, corporations can't do that, do-good organizations can't do that. Only governments can say, you know what, we're going to tax coal. And if the European governments, the North American governments, China, and India all figure out some way to make coal expensive, then we've got a shot. And if they don't, it's very scary. So, you know, we're talking about technological solutions, but I just, you know, put out frankly, a political one. Mm-hmm.
But couldn't you make a case that the phasing out of fossil fuels could be a market-driven phenomenon rather than a fiat-driven phenomenon?
Ideally, and one of the things that surprised me that way is that overpopulation we thought was going to have to be fiat-driven. This was my old teacher Paul Ehrlich's view, was that states would have to basically decree how many children people could have, and one state did that, China. But it turned out that that what demographers called the demographic transition, which is that as people get better off, thanks to technology and cities and so on, they automatically have fewer children. Paul said that can't possibly be true. He was wrong. The demographers were right. Barry Commoner was right, the swine. And, and I was wrong because I was following Paul. So this was a case where actually you did not need government fiat to fix the problem. There's talk in China now of getting rid of the one child per family rule, and the demographers are telling the Chinese, do what you want, it doesn't make any difference. People are gotten used to it, they sort of like it, and they're only going to have one child per family anymore, as has already happened in most parts of the world that have been developed for a while. So you may be right. I would love it if coal just gets, becomes old and dirty and in the way because of great new cool, clean stuff. Fusion might be that cool, clean new thing, but it takes a government to create a fusion technology.